In 1982, Turkey made a Star Wars movie. They had no budget, no special effects, and no rights to Star Wars, so they just stole the actual footage. And that's not even the craziest ripoff on this list. Starcrash is what happens when you make Star Wars, but you're Italian and it's 1978. The whole movie looks like someone raided Studio 54 for costumes and then shot everything through Vaseline. There's a scene with a full lightsaber battle, and they've got a cocky space smuggler and his sexy alien sidekick. And somehow they convinced Christopher Plummer to be in this. So there's Christopher Plummer from The Sound of Music playing the Emperor of the Galaxy in a cheap Italian Star Wars knockoff. The other lead is David Hasselhoff playing a prince in a golden mask. This was before Baywatch, before he became this icon of masculinity in the 80s. In Starcrash, he's this pretty boy prince who barely does anything, and it's funny to watch knowing what came next. They put it in theaters less than a year after Star Wars came out, and critics, of course, tore it apart. Same year, the Japanese made Message from Space. It was actually the first feature-length Star Wars ripoff. $6 million budget, most expensive Japanese film ever made at that point. They got American actors Vic Morrow and Sonny Chiba, built elaborate sets, and somehow the special effects still look terrible. The New York Times said it was so terrible it has a certain comic integrity. The LA Times said maybe small children would like it if they could figure out what was happening. But Message from Space is the one that actually tried to do something different. The director was Kinji Fukasaku, who later made Battle Royale, Tarantino's favorite movie, and he brought this completely insane energy to it. The spaceships are old pirate ships that float in space, and the evil empire is space samurai with chrome-painted faces. It's not good exactly, but it's doing its own deranged thing while still obviously cashing in on Star Wars. That makes it more interesting than just being a straight copy. Then in 1985, there was Starchaser, The Legend of Orin, and this one's just uncomfortable. It's animated. The main character looks like Luke Skywalker mixed with He-Man. He works in an underground mine for a villain named Zygon who wears a Vader-style mask. Early in the movie, Zygon strangles the main character's girlfriend to death, and then the movie keeps going like that's normal. If Darth Vader murdered Princess Leia in the first 15 minutes of Star Wars and Luke just shrugged and kept going, that's basically what happens here. Later, the heroes go to a planet where instead of the fun cantina creatures from Star Wars, there are animated prostitutes, in a movie that seems like it's supposed to be for kids. Nobody knows who Starchaser was made for. It's too dark and weird for children. It's too poorly made for adults. It's got this sleazy quality that makes it one of the strangest Star Wars ripoffs ever produced. Disney was broke in the late 70s, like actually in trouble financially. The Mouse House needed a hit, and they looked at Star Wars raking in money and thought, we need to do that. So they made The Black Hole, which starts out like a normal space adventure. There's an exploratory ship, they find a massive black hole, and near it there's a lost ship with one survivor, Dr. Hans Reinhardt, played by Maximilian Schell. He's a brilliant scientist who's built an army of creepy robots, and he's planning to pilot the ship straight into the black hole. The first half of the movie is pretty standard Disney fare with cute robots. Then they actually go into the black hole. What happens next is this psychedelic nightmare sequence, and it gets genuinely dark and disturbing. Anthony Perkins' character dies in this cold-blooded way that doesn't fit the tone of anything that came before it. And the ending is some trippy vision of hell that has absolutely no business being in a Disney movie. The whole thing is such an oddity that it's worth watching just to see how wrong they got it. Roger Corman saw everyone making Star Wars ripoffs and decided he wanted in. But Corman's whole thing was making cheap movies efficiently, so he took the story of Kurosawa's Seven Samurai and just did it in space. A farm boy from a distant planet teams up with a space cowboy to fight an evil galactic ruler. At $2 million, this was the most expensive movie Corman had ever made. And he was efficient with that budget. The spaceship designs are actually pretty good. The optical effects work better than you'd expect. He even got real talent involved. John Sayles wrote the script, and he'd go on to become this acclaimed screenwriter and director. James Horner did the score, the same James Horner who later scored Titanic and Avatar. And a young James Cameron worked on the production design and special effects. This is where Cameron met Gale Ann Hurd, who would later produce The Terminator. So without Battle Beyond the Stars, the Terminator franchise might not exist, which is a weird legacy for a cheap Star Wars knockoff to have. Columbia Pictures wanted their own slice of the Star Wars money, and in 1983 they had a plan. Return of the Jedi was coming out on May 25th, and everyone knew it was going to be massive. So Columbia scheduled Spacehunter to release on May 20th, 1 week before Jedi. The thinking was they'd catch all the sci-fi fans during peak Star Wars hype right before everyone went to see the real thing. Get in, grab some box office, get out. Opening weekend, the plan actually worked. Spacehunter debuted at #1 and made $7 million. Columbia executives probably felt pretty smart about their strategy. Then Return of the Jedi came out a week later and completely wiped it off the map. Turns out releasing your knockoff right before the real thing isn't actually a great long-term strategy. The movie itself is about a bounty hunter who travels through a post-apocalyptic wasteland to rescue 3 women kidnapped by some tyrant. It's got all the problems you'd expect from an early 80s B-movie. Dated effects, weak dialogue, questionable acting, but it's got this weird charm to it. Michael Ironside plays the tyrant, and even under all the makeup, he's genuinely menacing. So in 1982, Turkey made a Star Wars movie, except they didn't have the rights to Star Wars, and they didn't have money, and they didn't have special effects, but what they did have was access to a copy of The New Hope and apparently zero fear of copyright law. The movie opens with footage from Star Wars, the Millennium Falcon, the Death Star, all of it just lifted straight from the original film and plugged into their movie. They also grabbed footage from the Mos Eisley Cantina scene, and for good measure, they threw in music from Raiders of the Lost Ark. How they got away with this is genuinely one of the great mysteries of international cinema. The actual plot is about 2 spacefighter pilots who crash on a desert planet, and then they have to fight some evil wizard and his minions. It's so unbelievably cheap and so completely shameless that it ends up being weirdly entertaining. The audacity of it is kind of amazing. Yor came out in 1983, same year as Return of the Jedi. It was adapted from an Italian miniseries, and it starts out as a standard caveman adventure movie. You've got a blonde, muscle-bound hunter played by Reb Brown, wandering around a prehistoric world fighting dinosaurs and saving primitive tribes. For the first chunk of the movie, it's exactly what you'd expect, standard Conan-style barbarian stuff. And then in the final act, the movie just completely changes genres. Yor discovers an enclave of advanced technology ruled by a villain called the Overlord who's got lasers and android armies. Turns out the whole prehistoric world is actually post-apocalyptic. Nuclear holocaust happened, humanity reverted to cavemen, and the Overlord represents what's left of the old technological society. So suddenly Yor's grabbing laser guns and fighting in sci-fi battles. The movie goes from caveman versus dinosaurs to full Star Wars-style fortress assault in about 10 minutes. Critics destroyed it. The New York Times review literally said, "I didn't see it all and can't imagine who would want to." It's been called one of the stupidest films to emerge from the 1980s. The Last Starfighter is somewhat different because it's actually good. It's not a cynical ripoff. It's more like someone took the Star Wars formula and gave it a legitimate twist. The idea is simple. What if a video game was recruiting real starfighter pilots? A kid named Alex plays so well that aliens show up and tell him he's been selected for an actual intergalactic war. It's the same basic structure as Star Wars. Young hero goes on an adventure in a fantastic world at war. But it's brought to the present day with this video game hook, and the special effects were cutting edge for the time. They used early CGI for the space battles, which was pretty ambitious.